Well, in week two, we have these two wonderful texts. And if we put them side by side, keeping in mind that they're on more or less the same subject and seek to give an answer to a certain question, perhaps, that they're of very different length. Usually that means nothing, I think, in literature or philosophy, but I think that in this case, it's worth noting. The letter to Menoikos is a couple of pages long. And when it comes to the actual, I would say, our focus, how it relates to our theme for this week, it's really only a few sentences from Epicurus. Whereas the Phaedo is a pretty long dialogue, pretty long work, and filled with very demanding arguments and very strenuous reasoning. I think that's worth noting, and I'll tell you why, or why I think so. But okay, our questions, which we're taking seriously. What am I? As a creature am I? What can I know? And what can I hope for? I like that question. And I thought that in response to that last question, what can we hope for, or what can I hope for, that I would give you these two texts, which are the most important philosophical texts, I think, on death that in the Western tradition that I know of, the letter to Menoikos and the Phaedo. And really not only about death, but characterizing what death is, but also, at least in the case of Plato, arguing very detailed way about the possibilities for immortality. And whether the soul survives the death of the body. And, maybe in a certain sense, the Phaedo is the most hopeful text ever written in that respect. Because what we can hope for, especially the philosopher, as we'll see, in particular, the philosopher, the person who spends their earthly life seeking knowledge, the philosopher has the most to hope for when in thinking about death. There couldn't be two more different, less compatible, more contradictory notions of what death is than the difference of opinion on it between Epicurus and Plato. As we'll see, Epicurus views death in very simple terms. He doesn't think there's much to be argued about. Death is the end. Death is the privation of all consciousness. Death is becoming nothing. And it's really accepting that, as we'll see, which is one of the requirements for being happy. Whereas Plato takes a very different view of it. We'll go into the details of it, but I think these are two very good texts to put next to each other as differing answers to that question, what can we hope for? Epicurus, I think, would have to answer and say, ultimately, well, nothing, but that's okay. That is, if we're hoping for something beyond our earthly life, then those hopes will be dashed, but that means you shouldn't hope for anything beyond your earthly life. Doesn't see it as a big tragedy, whereas Plato in the Phaedo sees things in quite different terms. So these are, I think, a couple of very good texts to contrast with each other in terms of their answer to that question, what can we hope for?